Hi boys and girls, happy Monday. I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Welcome to ELA with Miss V. Today I'm going to go ahead and be jumping in, starting right into what we're going to be learning and doing for this next week. As you already know, this is a pre-recorded video for you because most of the teachers and some 6th grade students are back to in person. So we did have to make our online students a pre-recorded video. So I'm going to be going over some stuff. This video, if you need to stop for whatever reason to jot down notes or to re-watch, please feel free to do so. So as you can see, we are going to be starting the month of October within this next week. We are also today, we are going to be working on Handout 13B, the essay process. So this is what I'm going to actually be going over. And throughout today's lesson, I'll go ahead and show you what it is that you're going to be needing in order to follow along, okay? I did go ahead and put in here as well, this is the first day of October, which will be this Thursday, so we're finishing these last 3 days of September. And then I went ahead and highlighted October 4th because that is my birthday, yay! And then, of course, throughout that week, boys and girls, next week on the 8th, we will be having our bi-weekly assessment number 3. And then on Friday, you will not have any school. That's next week, though. So on the 9th, I just want to give you these dates ahead of advance, just in case you're the type of person who likes to write things down in your planner and likes to know ahead of advance. There also is going to be another day that is going to be Columbus Day, no school for students or teachers, so that's going to be things to look forward to in October. But before we get started, I know that last week we went ahead and took our bi-weekly assessment number 2, and I really want to go ahead and show you where we ended up, where Idea McAllen ended up on the map for data. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that right now. What I'm doing at this time is I'm gonna, I kind of already on Friday showed you, where we were, but I did tell you that some of the other my idea schools were taking the bi-weekly assessment too. So I told you, oh, we won't find out where we land until Monday. So now that it is finally Monday, I'm gonna go ahead and be showing you where we landed. So last time we were number 1, right, for bi-weekly assessment number 1. Idea McAllen ended up in first place, the highest of the highest scores, so congratulations to you guys. But I do want to show you where we ended up on our second bi-weekly exam. So that is what I'm doing for us at the moment. Let me go ahead and just move my window somewhere over here. We are going to be looking for ELA 6th grade Fall 20 bi-weekly number 2, and I'm going to go ahead and add those filters. So I'm sure you guys are just as nervous as I am because I have no idea where we ended up on the map, but let's go ahead and see. So as we can see here, we start off with the schools that didn't have the very best scores, and as we move on, we go up and up to see where it is we ended up. So notice how Idea McAllen came in 2nd place. Well, it's okay though because we're still at the top, and that's perfectly fine. We did have Riverview College Prep beat us by just a couple of points this time. As you can see, we were very close in numbers. Riverview had 75% of students get masters, and Idea McAllen had about 71% of students get masters. And then you can also see, some more scoring over here. But for the most part, boys and girls, we're still at the top, so we're going to have to try to, do as much as we can so that when bi-weekly assessment number 3 comes around, so when this bi-weekly assessment next week comes around, we can get back to taking our first place spot. Okay, so just wanted to update you on that, boys and girls. I'm going to go ahead and move myself back here, and I'm going to go ahead and continue with today's presentation. So like I said, today we're going to go ahead and be going over the essay process. But before I do that, I'm sure I have some students who are a little confused because, we have a new schedule, once again. But the reason why we have a new schedule, boys and girls, is because There's some people who are online and then there's some people who are in person, so we're having to make those adjustments to the schedules. It feels like every week there's a new schedule, but this should be the permanent one that we're going to continue keeping for now. So just to let you know, this is what we're going to be looking at. So, as you can see here, boys and girls, this is going to be this week's schedule. Obviously, you don't have to worry about this part right here. Teachers need to arrive on campus between 6:30 and 7, so you don't really necessarily need to worry about that part. That's for us teachers. Those students who are going to in-campus instruction, though, you probably already know that you need to be at school by or between 7:10 in the morning to like about, I believe it's 7:30. That's the time that you need to be dropped off in the morning. But for all my other students, I want you to know that homeroom does start earlier for the students that are going to in-campus instruction. For all of my online students, right here, notice how homeroom for you does not start until 7:45. Okay, so my students that are learning from home, your schedule is not going to necessarily change with homeroom. It's only my students that are coming back to school in person where their schedule is going to change just a little bit. It's going to be earlier, okay? So, once again, my students who are learning at home, if you're at home learning, homeroom for you starts at 7:45. Okay, but if my students that are going back to school in person, well, school's going to start a little earlier for you. You need to be arriving to school around 7:10 to 7:30, around that time. And then, of course, homeroom for all of our students will not end until 8:30. So notice how homeroom is a little longer because we're having to adjust, okay? So first period is going to start until 8:30. That's when first period will start, okay? Usually, a lot of us have different classes during first period, but yeah, this is the schedule we'll be following. Notice how your classes will be an hour long now, which is great because we won't have to be rushing like we were last week with the 40 minutes, but that's a good thing. So, my ELA classes, I do have conference first period, so that's the time I have my conference. I don't have a first period. I don't start class until second period with my ELA. So my homeroom, of course, will start ELA at 9:30 to 10:30. And then, of course, Ms. Escobedo's homeroom, I won't be seeing you guys until 10:30 to 11:30 every single day of this week. And then notice here how we have a 30-minute closing the achievement gap reteach time. So this is a time for teachers to contact those students who are needing that extra help. I did mention to us, those students who did not do very good on the biweeklies. If you did not pass it, this is going to be the time where I come and help you. I will be calling you through the Teams or sometimes even through the phone to reteach some things that we need to learn again, okay? Lunch for everyone will be between the times of 12 to 1, so we still have our 1-hour lunch. And then my fourth period, which is Mr. Martinez's class, or Mr. Martinez's homeroom, I won't be seeing you boys and girls until 1 to 2 o'clock, which is almost like the same time. We're just starting 10 minutes earlier this time, okay? So, yes, fourth period with Mr. Martinez's homeroom at 1 to 2. And then, of course, last but not least, my fifth period, Mr. Chapa's homeroom, I will be seeing you guys between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And then we do have another 30 minutes of closing the achievement gap / reteach time. That is my time to be able to reteach things if I need to reteach. This is the time for you to come to me if you have questions or need to talk about something. And then for my students that are in person, if you're in class in person, then you're going to go ahead and be, that's going to be our pickup time. So as we can see here, 3:30 to 4:50, that is, the pickup process. So it is very important that your parents do try, if you're in person, to pick you up at, the pickup time, which is 3:30. So parents, if you're watching this, please make sure you pick up your child at 3:30. Okay, so our focusing question for this whole week is going to be what sustained people's spirits during the Great Depression. So what kept them thinking positively? What kept them, what kept their mind, distracted from all of this negativity that was going on around them? So that's what we're going to be learning and discussing this week. In the Great Minds in Sync app, we are finally in Module 1, Focusing Question Arc 4, which is the one that is highlighted at this time. What sustained people's spirits during the Great Depression? So our objective today, we're going to be, or students will be able to analyze the various components of an exemplar explanatory essay of the hardships people faced during the Great Depression, which is one of the worksheets in your Wit and Wisdom journal that we are going to be going over. And before we get started with today's class, you do have some pieces of homework that you will have to take care of after watching this video. So one of those pieces is going to be an exit ticket on Teams, and it's going to be in relation to this handout that we're going to be going over, okay? So once again, let me just go ahead and show you at this time. I'm going to pull up my camera. So we are going to be focusing on a handout that looks like this. It is in your Wit and Wisdom student workbook. And not only that, but it is called Handout 13B, Exemplar Explanatory Essay. So by the time we finish going over and reading this page in your student workbook, your paper should look something like this, okay? You can use markers, you can use highlighters, you can use a pencil. If you don't have any of those markers or highlighters, it's perfectly fine, but please make sure that you do try your very best to follow along. Now, if you don't have the Student Wit and Wisdom workbook, then do try your absolute best to make sure you listen and you follow along when I am reading so that you do know what is going on in this explanatory essay. Now, the reason why I'm going over this page, boys and girls, is because this is going to help us with becoming better listeners, with becoming better speakers, and with becoming better writers. So ultimately, this page right here is going to be able to help us become better writers because I am going to be explaining the very important components of the explanatory essay model, okay? What should your essays look like in the future? So yeah, that's what we're going to be going over today. So let's go ahead and jump right in and get started with that. So I would just like to let my students know before we start going into this handout, you are able to find a PDF version in our files for your classroom. If you go into Module 1, and you click on Out of the Dust, Karen Hess folder, there is a PDF file right here. Notice how it says Wit and Wisdom in Sync 6th grade, Module 1, L13, Student Handout 13B, Exemplar Essay. So if I click on that PDF, you can go ahead and download this to your computer, or you can also read from it right here. So if I zoom in, I can actually follow along with what I'm going to be reading. Now, I would suggest downloading it because if you download it to your computer, you will actually be able to highlight it. So notice how I downloaded it, right? This is in my downloads. It pops up for me. So if I click that, I'll be able to actually highlight some of the important information that I'm going to be reading in this example for us. So once again, just to show us, boys and girls, how do I access this? Well, in your Teams for ELA, let's say, I'm in Ms. Villarreal's ELA, whatever class you're in, this will be in every single class. All you have to do is go and click on the word Files up here in these tabs. Once you click on Files, you will go to Module 1. Then you'll go ahead and click on Out of the Dust. So if you click on that folder, the very last thing, this one right here, it should say www_insync_G6 for 6th grade, handout 13B. So if you hover your cursor right over that, you'll go ahead and read that it's a PDF file. So if I click on that, notice how it gives me the whole name up here. If I click on that, I can either download it to my computer, which is what I want you to do so that you can highlight with us, or you can read along and follow along. But I would suggest downloading it once again to your computer. It should pop up that it's downloading, and then once you click on the blue little button, if you click on the blue little button that says downloaded, it'll go ahead and it'll take you to a folder that looks like this, something like this, and then you just click on what you just downloaded to your computer, and then from here you can make it smaller with the little zoom out button. You can highlight certain things with your mouse pad. So this is what we're going over at this time. We're going to be going over Handout 13B, Explanatory Essay. So this is an exemplar essay that is going to be going ahead and talking about the Great Depression and what a lot of people faced. You do have this in your student workbook. Once again, I don't know the exact page, but it will be labeled 13B, and this can also be found in a PDF file that is going to be left on our Microsoft Teams page. But for the most part, I'm going to go ahead and be reading it to us, and we're going to be going over it and kind of just quickly discussing a lot of what was going on during the Great Depression. As many of you know, we did just finish our first book, Bud Not Buddy, which I'm really proud of. The maxim, when one door closes, another one opens, applies to people's experiences during the Great Depression, a period lasting from 1929 until World War II. Many Americans during the Great Depression experienced some type of hardship, whether this meant a lost job, a lost farm or home, or an inability to feed or take care of their families. So we know that during the Great Depression, many Americans experienced some type of hardship. Now, that could have meant a lost job, a lost farm, home, or the inability, not being able to take care or feed their families. Because of this hardship, Americans had to adapt to loss and difficulty by finding a way to make something positive come from something negative. So, Americans had to adapt to loss and difficulty by finding ways to make something so negative into a positive. The communities built in Hoovervilles and the unions formed in factories showed how the people of the Great Depression opened doors for themselves. So we're going to be discussing Hoovervilles, the people from Hoovervilles, the communities, and how unions formed in factories showed how people during the Great Depression opened doors for themselves. So notice, boys and girls, just in this first introduction, we notice that they start off with a quote. When one door closes, another one opens. And then as we continue reading, they discuss the Great Depression. They mention a little bit of information about the Great Depression, when the Great Depression was lasting, or when it started, I should say, when it lasted and when it started. And then it also gives us a little bit more about its main idea, which is going to be talking about how people experience some type of hardship during the Great Depression. And then they give us an example, a lost job, a lost farm, home, or of course, like we've mentioned many times in our classroom, the inability to take care of their families. So in this introduction, it ties back. This very last sentence is always important because this is going to be our main thesis statement. This is going to be our main idea in this essay that is going to be discussing how people had to find ways to open doors for themselves, turning negatives into positives somehow. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our first body paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to just label this part right here. I'm going to go ahead and label this introduction. because this is our introduction to this exemplar explanatory essay. If we were to write an explanatory essay, we would want our introduction to have important pieces of information, like about what we're talking about. If in this case, we're talking about the Great Depression, we had dates, we had examples of people that went through specific things in the Great Depression, and then of course our thesis statement, which is our main idea. So if we remember, we went over the 2-seek model and how we should, start our writing. So in this case, we would be starting with our topic statement. So our topic statement is also known, or can be also known, our thesis, which is, one main essential idea about our topic. And in this case, this is where our thesis would be. The communities built in Hoovervilles and unions formed in factories showed how people of the Great Depression opened doors for themselves. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to our body paragraph. So let's go ahead and check this out. Unemployment and homelessness, two closing doors of the Great Depression, created shanty towns called Hoovervilles, which became home to many people. During this period, some 13 million to 15 million Americans were unemployed. So this is going to be where we have our evidence. So notice how we include evidence. 13 million to 15 million Americans were unemployed. And then we have our citation, which is found in the Hoovervilles article. And then we go on to explain a little bit more about our evidence. So let me go ahead and continue reading. During this period, some 13 million to 15 million Americans were unemployed, and unemployment often caused homelessness. Because people could no longer pay their rent or mortgage, people were turned out of their homes with nowhere to go. Often, young teenagers would leave their homes and become homeless, hoping to ease the burden they placed on their families. For some, Hoovervilles became their new home. Hoovervilles were shanty towns that cropped up because the nation's primary on the outskirts of major cities. So in that sentence, boys and girls, the one that I just read, this is another piece of our evidence about what a Hooverville was. So Hoovervilles were, this is coming from an article, right? So this is evidence coming from a different source that we are using. So, shanty towns that cropped up against the nation, primarily on the outskirts of major cities. So this was also found in the same article called Hooverville. So notice here how we have two pieces of evidence so far. We have the one talking about how many Americans were unemployed, and then we have another piece of evidence that is discussing what a Hooverville was, or where they were in some cities. So they were on the outskirts, meaning like on the outer area of major cities. It says, however, despite the conditions at the camps, for example, many people slept in shelters made out of cardboard boxes, Hoovervilles opened doors for people. So right here, boys and girls, notice how this tiny sentence right here is connecting back to our main idea about opening doors. When one door closes, another one opens. So it connects back to the main idea. Hoovervilles open doors for people. Hoovervilles offered a sense of community. A migrant could find food and shelter, and most importantly, a sympathetic ear. Notice how my quotation is about to start, as we can see our quotation marks right there. The one place where the young hobo was assured a welcome,
was the jungle, as the hobo camps were called. Our ending quotation ends right here, plus we have our citation. Notice how we have the name, the last name of an author in parentheses. Now we're going to go ahead. We had another piece of evidence right here. So that's actually 3 pieces of evidence that we have in this paragraph. So after our evidence, we always have to elaborate in our own words. So this is exactly what is going to be shown. People helping people define these hobo camps or Hoovervilles. In a time when everything was scarce, Hoovervilles offered people a place where generosity and compassion were practiced. So it goes on to explain a little bit more about Hoovervilles. They offer generosity and compassion. Even though the door of a home had closed for some, the door of community help had opened. So, I really want us to focus on this very last sentence because it's so powerful. It's talking about, once again, how the door of a person's home might have closed, but for some, the door of community for help had opened. So, once again, we see how this idea of having a door closed and having another one open is a type of expression. It's a type of figurative language. We're talking about how people had so much that was happening to them, and they might have felt like as if one door was closing, but then they always had, some had these helping hands for their community. So that idea of helping others during this difficult time had opened. So that is our body paragraph. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and label this. This was our body number 1. Body paragraph. Body paragraph number 1. And like I said, boys and girls, going back to our evidence, in the 2-seek model, we notice that we include evidence into our writing, and then we always have to follow it with explanation or our own elaboration, the explanation in our own words. So evidence, we notice here in this particular paragraph that we had 3 pieces of evidence. We had one from the Hoovervilles. We had another quote talking about what Hoovervilles were or what they were called or where they were located, again in the Hoovervilles article. So we went ahead and made sure that we had both of our citations, because citations always go right behind our evidence. That is where we're getting our information from. And then not only that, but we had another quote that is coming from another piece of article, which is talking about what they called these places. And after the evidence, boys and girls, we always see that we have some type of explanation in our own words. So right after our evidence, as you can see in the 2-seek, right after we put evidence, we always have to elaborate, where we explain how the evidence develops our topic or connects with our ideas. So in this exemplar explanatory essay, we're going to notice that we have another body paragraph. So it's really awesome because sometimes I'm going to be assigning you where you have to give me an introduction, you have to give me one body paragraph, and then you have to give me your conclusion. But in this example, I love how it gives us another body paragraph, because in this body paragraph you can already see that we're going to be getting quotes and evidence from the GM, the General Motors sit-down strike. So let's go ahead and dive into this. I'm going to go ahead and put my bracket because this is going to be the second body paragraph we're going to be examining. Poor labor conditions close another door for people during the Great Depression, resulting in a door opening with the formation of unions. So, just right here in that first sentence, we can see that they mention that another door might have been closing for people during the Great Depression, but this resulted in a door opening for the formation of unions. Manufacturer workers had no rights and could be fired for any reason. So, this right here, this tiny piece of evidence, right here, no rights, was found in the GM sit-down strike video. So I don't know if you remember, boys and girls, that I showed you a video on YouTube, and it was called the General Motors sit-down strike. So this was something that was said in the sit-down strike video. For example, people did not have job security if they got hurt at work. If they could not perform their job, a worker would simply be let go without pay. If a worker lost his job, often he would face additional hardships like losing his home. So right here, boys and girls, we are explaining, this is our elaboration piece, we are explaining what would happen to these workers and why they were deciding to form unions, because a lot of them, were not being treated fairly. And if they could not perform their work, or if they got hurt during work, they would simply be let go, meaning they would get fired. And often, when someone gets fired, it's really hard to get back on your feet at times because, at that time during the Great Depression, there wasn't really many jobs for people. So people started losing their homes. Protected employment was a necessity for people so that they could depend on their wages to pay their bills and to feed their families. As a result of this closed door, workers banded together to form unions, an action that resulted in opening doors for countless people. The union's purpose was for workers to help other workers. They helped each other by organizing sit-downs and bravely standing up to injustice, eventually securing workplace rights as a result of their protests and strikes. So, as we can see, boys and girls, these people were fighting so that they could have job security. So they could have, basic working rights, and so that they could, ultimately at the end of the day, make sure that they were able to pay their bills and to feed their families. That's what was a lot of people's priority during that time, making sure that they were able to take care of their family. Now, as a result of this closed door, people formed unions, which were thinking back to Bud and Lefty Lewis when they got stopped by the cop. We learned that a lot of people were angry and started forming unions so that they could, stand up to injustice by protesting, by having these strikes, so that they could secure their workplace rights, having fair rights to their jobs. And as a result of these protests and strike, they were able to actually successfully have legal rights. So let's go ahead and continue reading. It says here, because of their actions, the auto worker became a different human being. So the auto worker. When we hear the word auto worker, we have to think of workers that worked for General Motors. So that is a piece of evidence that is found in the GM sit-down strike video. And then we go on to close out this piece of evidence right here. It says, the people who formed unions and organized protests successfully opened doors for all future workers to have legal rights that could not be taken away by any employers. So because of these organized protests and because of these formed unions by people, standing up for justice, they went ahead and they were successfully able to open doors for all of the people. So what I really want us to take away is to notice how in both of these paragraphs, boys and girls, in body paragraph number 1 and body paragraph number 2, they always go back and reiterate on how one door might be closed, but how another door is opening. Same thing down here. It tells us, a lot of workers were going through a lot of hardships, but they did not let that stand in the way from them, trying their best to fight against this inequality. So at the very end of this body paragraph number 2, notice how the formed unions and the organized protests successfully opened doors for people. So going back to our very, very beginning in the introduction, reinstating our main idea in both of those paragraphs. So that is really important. You always want to make sure that you try to do your best when it comes to restating your essential idea. So now we're just going to quickly close this off with our conclusion. Okay, so notice how in our 2-seek model we already went ahead, we stated our main idea at the very beginning in the introduction. Okay, we also cited evidence, we included our citation, we had evidence in both body paragraphs, right? We had our, evidence. Some evidence was shorter than others, but we still always included our citation, which is really important. And then we also had our elaboration where we explain about the evidence in both body paragraphs, which is extremely important. Now we're going to go ahead and focus on our concluding statement where we're going to close off our essay and just reinforce our essential idea and conclude our thoughts. So let me go ahead and start reading this to us. Once again, this is going to be our conclusion and how we close off our essay. Few periods in American history have been as catastrophic as the Great Depression was for so many millions. It closed doors for many, sometimes doors that would stay slammed shut. Yet for some, even with those closed doors of homelessness and unemployment, doors were open. Sometimes people found community and joined unions. For these people, the Great Depression was a positive and negative experience, where hardship was countered by the strength of the human spirit. So a few things I want to go ahead and just point out in this paragraph. Notice how, we go back and we state that we're talking about American history and how it was catastrophic as the Great Depression. We talk about how it affected millions. And then we go on to point out how it closed doors for many, but sometimes doors that would stay slammed shut, meaning it was like very, very hard for a lot of people. Yet for some, even with those closed doors of homelessness and unemployment, which were our main ideas, sometimes doors were open for them. We talk about in our conclusion how people found community and joined unions, right? That is what our body paragraphs were discussing. And then it goes on to say, for these people, the Great Depression was positive and negative experience. So if we remember, boys and girls, we talked about a little bit, we mentioned right here how finding a way to make something positive from something negative. Well, we go back into our concluding statement and we kind of just mention that again. And we kind of just go on to explain how the Great Depression was a positive and negative experience for a lot of people. Hardships was countered by the strength of the human spirit. So that's how we go ahead and we end our essay. which is awesome because this was, an essay that explained so much to us about how people, had to how they expressed their hardship and what happened during this time. On the back, you're going to go ahead and see something that looks like this right here. So you will see in your introduction, we usually have a hook, we introduce our main topic, and then we have a thesis statement, or like our main idea. And then in one body paragraph, you have your topic statement, you have a piece of evidence, elaboration, a citation, and then you elaborate. And then you include another piece of evidence, you have a citation, and then you elaborate, and then you have your concluding statement. So what might this look like? Well, our hook is where we want to grab the reader's attention. So in this case, this little saying right here would be our hook. Okay, this very first part. So our hook is always at the beginning. This is where we grab the reader's attention. Okay, so after we grab the reader's attention, we have to introduce what we're talking about. So when we introduce what we're talking about in our essay, we're going to go ahead and introduce how, we're talking about the Great Depression. We're talking about hardships and how people lost their job. That's what we're going to be really focusing on when it comes to introducing what we're going to be having in our essay. So in this case, it's like introducing the topic that you're going to be talking about. In this case, it was the Great Depression. And then, of course, you have your thesis statement at the end of the introduction. So the thesis statement would be like our very important main idea. Because of these hardships, so this would be our thesis statement right here. Because of the hardships, Americans had to adapt to the difficulty by finding something positive out of something negative. And then we have the communities of Hoovervilles and unions built factories. Unions formed factories and showed how people of the Great Depression opened doors for themselves. So that would be our thesis statement. This is our main idea right here. Main idea. And then in our body paragraph number 1, we have a topic statement, a very short topic statement, evidence and citation, and then elaboration. So if we go to our first body paragraph, we have our topic statement, which would be usually at the very beginning, right? We talk about what it's going to be focusing on in that particular paragraph. Right here, our topic statement. Unemployment and homelessness. So those are our main ideas that are going to be discussed in this first body paragraph. Then, after our topic statement, we have evidence and citation. So notice how, our evidence would be right here. We included evidence, and then our citation. Our citation is Hoovervilles. Okay? What comes after our evidence and our citation? Well, we have to elaborate. We have to put things in our own words. So that's exactly what we do after this. So after our evidence, we have our elaboration, where we explain our evidence. And then we go on to do that again. We kind of repeat ourselves here. We have a piece of evidence, and then we explain our evidence, and then we include another piece of evidence, and then we explain our evidence. And then, just to be extra, right, we have another piece of evidence. This is what's going to make us great researchers, when we include so much evidence and then we elaborate on that. Like, what is this evidence talking about, right? So then we go on to elaborate a little more. And then we close all of that with our concluding statement. Even though the door of a home had closed for some people, the door of a community had helped or opened for others. So, we included evidence and elaborations, and then we kind of close our paragraph off with our concluding statement, which would have been right here. Like I said, even though, a door had closed for some, the door of community had opened for others. So after we do this part right here, we're going to move on to our next body paragraph, which is body paragraph number 2. Same process. Topic statement, evidence, citation, elaboration, evidence, citation, elaboration. So we go back to body paragraph number 2. We have our pieces of evidence with our citation. We explain that a little more and we elaborate. And then again, we have a piece of evidence over here. We have one here, and we have one here with our citation. Our concluding statement kind of just closes off our evidence and our citation with our elaboration about what this was talking about. In this case, formed unions, people organizing protests, and of course, going back, concluding it with how one door opens, another one closes, and so on and so forth. So, notice how we repeat ourselves multiple times in the first body and then in the second body. Now, we're going to go ahead and close it off in our conclusion, which is this process right here. How do we tie all of our ideas back together? Okay. Once again, boys and girls, this is an exemplar, an example of how we would write an explanatory essay for the hardships of people and what they faced during the Great Depression. So, please make sure, you know, while you were following along in your student workbook, your paper should look something like this. So now that we went ahead and already finished going over the writing process and how to write an explanatory essay, we're going to go ahead and jump right into learning some new vocabulary words for this week. So get your ELA notebook ready because you are going to be doing some writing. So let me go ahead and just show you what your notebook should look like by the end of today's class period, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and open my camera. I already went ahead and wrote down in my ELA notebook the vocabulary for today's lesson. Notice how I do have most of my vocabulary words that we've been learning over this course of Module 1. I have them all in one journal or in one area, which is what I would definitely like for you guys to do as well. Try your best to keep your notes, you know, in one notebook so that if we do end up transitioning to school, or even if we stay learning online, you will have all of your notes in one place. So we're going to go over these quickly. You do need to write them down because they will be in your exit ticket for today. So let's go ahead and go over them quickly. I will also be playing the Wit and Wisdom video with Mr. K because his knowledge about teaching us vocabulary words for this week is, you know, great. And I love learning from others as well, not just from myself. But anyway, so spirit. We're going to be learning the word spirit. Whoopsie. Which is a person's mental or emotional state. We also have the word compassion, the feeling of sharing the suffering of another and wanting to help. Then we're going to look at the word sustained. Sustained means to bear the weight of and support, to keep up. And then the word drought. Some of us might know what a drought is, but it is the absence of water over a very long period of time. And then we have the word resilient at the bottom, able to endure and overcome hardships. So let's go ahead and watch this Great Mind in Sync video now at this time. Okay, boys and girls, so now that I'm actually here, I was about to show us the vocabulary video, but for some reason, it seems to be only playing in Spanish. Okay, so I don't know how to change this. It's not giving me that little option it usually gives me to change the Spanish to English, but what we're going to have to do is just roll with the flow, right? Roll with the punches and listen to it in Spanish, and then read what it says in English. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm so sorry. Maybe this will help us, right? We'll be learning from another language. Of course, most of us do know Spanish, so listening will actually help us maybe better understand. And if you don't know any Spanish, well, this is your time to maybe learn some and pick up a few words. But for the most part, the reading is in English. It's just that Mr. K is speaking in Spanish. I cannot seem to take off the translation part, so we'll just go with the flow, okay? I'll go ahead and re-explain the vocabulary words once we're done watching the Wit and Wisdom video, either way.
Les doy la bienvenida al vocabulario de Wit and Wisdom, grado 6, módulo 1. Soy el señor Kay y hoy veremos el arco 4 de la pregunta de enfoque. Empecemos. Aquí están las 5 palabras que vamos a practicar hoy para el arco 4 de la pregunta de enfoque. Sígueme mientras leo nuestras 5 nuevas palabras de vocabulario en voz alta. Espíritu, compasión, sostener, sequía y elástico. Trata de usar estas 5 palabras tanto como puedas siempre que estés hablando o escribiendo, para mejorar en su uso y practicarlas tanto como sea posible. Aprendamos más sobre estas palabras. Echemos un vistazo a nuestra primera palabra. Nuestra primera palabra es espíritu. Espíritu es un sustantivo. Su definición es estado mental o emocional de una persona. Escuchemos esta palabra en español. El espíritu es un sustantivo. Significa el estado mental o emocional de una persona. Observa la imagen que está en el medio de tu pantalla. Representa lo que parece feliz, contento, confundido y triste. Es el estado mental o emocional de una persona. ¿Cómo te sientes? Espíritu. Para esta práctica, te voy a leer una pregunta de discusión. Mientras leo esta pregunta, piensa en cuál podría ser su respuesta. Usa el iniciador de oraciones que está a continuación para discutir esta pregunta con alguien cercano. Comencemos. ¿Qué te levanta el ánimo cuando estás triste? Un comienzo de oración para que lo consideres es: cuando estoy triste, el espacio en blanco eleva mi espíritu, porque espacio en blanco. Continúa y pausa el video ahora mismo y comenta esta pregunta con alguien cercano. Escuchemos esa respuesta. Eso es fantástico. Muy buen esfuerzo. Mi espíritu se eleva al escuchar tu asombroso esfuerzo y tu excelente respuesta. Cuando estoy triste, jugar o hablar con mis amigos me levanta el ánimo porque disfruto hablar con personas a las que amo y respeto. Nuevamente, nuestra palabra es espíritu. Nuestra siguiente palabra es compasión. La compasión es un sustantivo. Su definición es el sentimiento de compartir el sufrimiento de otro y querer ayudar. Escuchemos esta palabra en español. La compasión es un sustantivo. Significa el sentimiento de compartir el sufrimiento de otra persona y de querer ayudarla. Nuevamente, nuestra palabra fue compasión. Observa la imagen que está en el medio de tu pantalla. Alguien extendiendo la mano hacia otra persona y el corazón, lo que significa que queremos ayudar y que amamos a esta persona o este individuo. Compartimos su sufrimiento. Compasión. Nuestra siguiente palabra es sostener. Sostener es un verbo. Significa soportar el peso y el apoyo o mantenerse al día. Escuchemos esta palabra en español. Mantener. Es un verbo. Significa llevar el peso de algo y sustentar. Continuar. Nuevamente, nuestra nueva palabra es sostener. Nota las manos en el medio. Están soportando el peso y sosteniendo a la gente que está en el medio. Están destinados a mantenerse al día, para mantener. Echemos un vistazo a algunas de las palabras de nuestro vocabulario en contexto. Vamos a leer una frase. Primero, leeré la oración en voz alta, y me gustaría que la siguieras por tu parte en silencio. Luego, leeremos esta oración por segunda vez, y esta vez me gustaría que la leyeras en voz alta conmigo. Practicaremos nuestra fluidez y aprenderemos nuestras palabras. Comencemos. La compasión hacia los demás ayudó a mantener el ánimo de las personas durante la Gran Depresión. Leamos eso una vez más. solo que esta vez leamos juntos. La compasión hacia los demás ayudó a mantener el ánimo de las personas durante la Gran Depresión. Eso es perfecto. Me encanta ese esfuerzo. Nuestra siguiente palabra es sequía. Sequía es un sustantivo y significa ausencia de lluvia durante un largo periodo de tiempo. Escuchemos esta palabra en español. La sequía es un sustantivo. Significa la falta de lluvia a través de un largo periodo de tiempo. Observa la imagen que está en el medio de tu pantalla. El suelo está seco y agrietado. El sol brilla y sostiene. La flor se ha marchitado. No llueve y no ha llovido en mucho tiempo. Sequía. Nuestra siguiente palabra es resiliente. Resiliente es un adjetivo y significa capaz de soportar y superar las dificultades. Escuchemos esta palabra en español. Resiliente. Es un adjetivo. Significa que puede soportar y superar dificultades. Observa la imagen que está en el medio de tu pantalla. Este individuo ha llegado a la cima. Han conquistado. Son resilientes, capaces de soportar las dificultades. Son resilientes. Eres resiliente. Practiquemos las palabras de nuestro vocabulario mirándolas en contexto. De nuevo, primero leeré esta oración en voz alta. Luego trabajaremos juntos y lo leeremos en voz alta al mismo tiempo para desarrollar nuestra fluidez y practicar nuestro vocabulario. Comencemos. Los personajes de Out of the Dust deben ser resilientes para sobrevivir a la sequía. Leamos eso una vez más, solo que esta vez leamos juntos. ¿Listo? Los personajes de Out of the Dust deben ser resilientes para sobrevivir a la sequía. Es verdad, Billy Joe y su padre deben ser resilientes. No ha llovido en mucho tiempo debido a la sequía que están experimentando. Hiciste un gran esfuerzo al leer esa frase conmigo. Hagamos una última práctica para asegurarnos de recordar las definiciones de las palabras que aprendimos en la práctica hoy. Voy a leer esta pregunta de opción múltiple en voz alta. Si es necesario, continúa y pausa el video para que puedas volver a leer la pregunta, o volver a tus notas y mirar las imágenes que aprendimos hoy. ¿Qué palabra significa el sentimiento de compartir el sufrimiento de otro y querer ayudar? Es A, espíritu, B, compasión, C, sostener o D, sequía. Una vez más, ¿cuál de esas 4 palabras significa el sentimiento de compartir el sufrimiento de otro y querer ayudar? Si elegiste la compasión, es perfecto. ¿Qué palabra significa el sentimiento de compartir el sufrimiento de otro y querer ayudar? Hagamos una última práctica para asegurarnos de recordar las definiciones de las palabras que aprendimos en la práctica hoy. Nuevamente, seguiré adelante mientras leo. Si es necesario, pausa el video y vuelve a tus notas. Toma en cuenta las imágenes que miramos hoy para que te ayuden a decidir qué respuesta es la correcta. Empecemos. ¿Qué palabra significa ausencia de lluvia durante un largo periodo de tiempo? Es A, espíritu, B, compasión, C, sostener o D, sequía. De nuevo, ¿cuál de esas 4 palabras significa ausencia de lluvia durante un largo periodo de tiempo? Si elegiste la sequía, fantástico. Sequía, la ausencia de lluvia durante un periodo prolongado. Estoy muy animado y emocionado de haber aprendido 5 palabras más de vocabulario que nos ayudarán a lo largo del módulo 1. Estoy muy emocionado por tu aprendizaje y espero sinceramente que practiques estas palabras junto con todas las otras palabras que hemos aprendido. Eso mantendrá mi espíritu en alto y te convertirá en un estudiante más resiliente en el futuro. Hasta la próxima, amigos. Adiós.
Alrighty, boys and girls, so we're back. I hope that, that was interesting for us because I know that we usually don't look at videos in Spanish, but it's nice to learn different things, right? And hopefully most of us were able to still understand what the video was talking about when it comes to those vocabulary words. But just in case you did not understand what in the world went on, I hope that you still wrote down the English version of the vocabulary word in your notebook. So like I said, I did already kind of read and mention these words earlier before the Wooden Wisdom video, but I'm going to do it just one more time for my students who are still a little bit confused. So, spirit. One spirit during something that's going on. In our new book, we're going to go ahead and learn about Billy Joe, which is a character. Her name, she's actually a girl. She's a young 14-year-old girl, and she is experiencing different things that we are going to read about in the book. But my main reason for mentioning Billy Joe is because her and her family have to really sustain their spirits during what they go through in their time period. So when we speak about spirit, it's about, a person's mentality and also their emotional state. Okay, we have a happy spirit, or sometimes we're feeling a little down and might have a sad spirit. It just depends what type of environment we surround ourselves in, and also what we might be going through in life at that time. Compassion. When we have compassion for others, it's when we are sharing that same, feeling. We're sharing that same feeling of suffering of another, and we want to try and help. Okay, you might have come across someone who might be going through a hardship, and when we show compassion to this person, we're showing that we're trying to help. We know that they're going through a difficult time, so you want to make sure that you're compassionate and that you show compassion to other people, especially when they're enduring some type of suffering or hardship in life. Sustain. So when we sustain something, we that means to bear the weight of and support or to keep up. So like I mentioned earlier, how did people sustain their spirit during the Great Depression? How did they keep their spirit alive during this hard time? So sustain. How do we maintain something, or how do we keep up with? The word drought, we might have heard before, which means that, it's a time period where there is no rain, absolutely no rain, and there is a time in history we went through what was called the Dust Bowl. So in the 1930s, there was a time where there was a lot of dust storms. And these dust storms were caused because of very dry land. There was a lot of drought that was happening at that period in time, and there was just no rain whatsoever. So this was a time period in the 1930s during the Dust Bowl where a lot of farmers were going through a lot of hardship because there was absolutely severe drought happening at that time. And then we have the word resilient. This is when we're able to endure and overcome hardships. Resilient. So these are our vocabulary words, boys and girls. What I'm going to go ahead and be showing you now is going to be where you can actually find the exit ticket. So in your assignments, just depending on your class, in your assignments you're going to go ahead and see something that says Monday ET Handout 13B. Now this will pop up at a specific time for all of my classes. So it just depends what class you're in, that's the time it's going to pop out. So be looking out for that exit ticket because it is a part of your homework. So if I go back to our homework for today, you do have that exit ticket, which is once again called Handout 13B Explanatory. It will be popping up at a specific time. So you need to make sure that you watch this whole video before you come to the exit ticket. So once you're done watching this video, you can go ahead and go into Teams. And in your assignments, it just depends what time you have ELA. It'll go ahead and pop up for you somewhere, okay? So in this case, for my third period, this is going to actually pop up at a certain time. So I can actually show you. For my third period, it's going to pop up at 10:30. So notice how I'm able to schedule these assignments for specific times. So every single period, it's going to be popping up for you at a specific time, okay? So just so that you know, this is what the exit ticket's going to look like, just so that we can have an idea. So it will be labeled Monday ET Handout 13B. It does say to complete this exit ticket only after you have watched today's class video on YouTube, which is what you're doing right now. You're going to finish watching and then you will take your exit ticket. It gives you a true or false question. Today's video was on how to successfully write an explanatory essay on the hardships people faced during the Great Depression. True or false? If you don't remember the answer, go back, start this video again, and watch it all over again so that you can know the answer to this question. Then we have our number 2. This is where you're going to go ahead and type in, what was one hardship mentioned in the essay that Ms. B read in the video? So you would write, 1, you start with a capitalized O, okay, because that's starting with capitalization at the beginning of your sentence. So capitalize that O. 1 hardship mentioned in the video was, and then you write it in, right? So I'm not going to tell you the answer. You have to try your own, use your own brain. I know you can do it, so I want to read what you write. So once you write in what was one hardship mentioned in today's video when we read the essay, you'll go ahead and you write that in, and you always include a period, okay? The only reason I didn't write it in is because I don't want to give you the answer. So you try your best. There is that sentence stem for you, so make sure you write in a complete sentence. That's what I'm going to be looking for. It's worth 10 points. Very simple. If you just write one word, that's going to be 1 point. But if you write in a complete sentence like this, and you actually include like your answer with a period, right, then I'm going to give you the full 10 points. Next, select all that apply. So this is going to be a multiple choice. Not only multiple choice, but it's going to be multiple answers. So you do choose more than one answer. What 3 parts make up an introduction? So there's 3 answers here that make up an introduction. We went over this at the beginning of this video when we reviewed the explanatory exemplar explanatory essay. So be careful with that because we're looking at introduction. That's the very beginning of an essay. Choose multiple answers. That means that we have another multiple choice question, but it's going to have multiple answers, meaning more than one answer. What are all the components of successfully writing an explanatory essay? All of the components. Everything that we need to include in an explanatory essay. What are they? Okay? So I'm not going to tell you the answer to that, but it is worth 5 points. If you need to go back and watch the video again, they are mentioned in the earlier parts of the video. Number 5, match the definition with the correct vocabulary word. The definition is a person's mental or emotional state. Same thing with number 5, you read the definition, you match it with its correct word. Okay, so this is going back to the vocabulary we learned today. I don't want to hear excuses. Well, miss, it was in Spanish. I didn't understand. Well, it was written for you in English as well, so there's no excuses, okay? Make sure you submit, and it should give you your score right off the bat. Alrighty? Awesome. Well, boys and girls, let me go ahead and close that out. That is the ending of our class. Happy Monday. I hope that you learned a lot today. I tried my very best to teach you as much as I can. I'm sorry that this video was so long. There's just so much information that we were not able to cover last week, so I had to catch us up. Please make sure you do your homework. One piece of your homework is the exit ticket, okay, after watching this video, and the next piece of homework is making sure you write down the vocabulary words, which should already kind of be done, right? You should have already done that while you were watching the Wit and Wisdom video for vocab. So, I hope you have a wonderful Monday. Make sure to get your exit ticket done and to write down your vocab. And I will go ahead and see you guys tomorrow. We will be starting our new book called Out of the Dust. I will be providing you with the recordings. It looks like this right here, Out of the Dust by Karen Hess. I will be providing you with the recordings like I did at the ending of Bud Not Buddy. Those do take me time, so I promise we will work on that, okay? See you guys. Hope you have a wonderful Monday. See you tomorrow.